Yeah, is that okay? I'm just trying to do balance. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. And then remember, adjust this.
Long. That's it. So aggressive. Yeah, good. Okay. Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Happy day after budget signing day, which is exciting. Last night marked a very important milestone for Richmond as the City Council voted to adopt our $3.4 billion FY27 budget, which is a budget that was shaped through a really collaborative and intentional process that started late last summer. I want to begin by thanking Council President Newbill and every member of City Council, thanking our administration and our finance department in particular, our budget department, and the over 1,000 Richmond residents who participated directly in the process. And I want to focus on three things in particular. First, I want to talk about the process, because one of the things that we have been really committed to in this administration is continuous quality improvement. Hopefully you all will remember that after last year's budget, we formed a joint council and administration budget task force to look at what worked, what didn't, and how we could improve the process for next year. And so back in September, we stood side by side at Maymont, and we officially launched our refreshed budget process that was shaped by 6 recommendations that came from that budget task force. Early collaboration replaced late-stage scrambling. A clear, publicly notified timeline, efficient work sessions, and standardized amendment procedures that would make the process smoother and easier for the public to follow along. Enhanced public engagement through 6 town halls and more than 1,000 residents who participated in those. And then instituting our annual review, which will give us the opportunity to take a critical look at what went well and what we need to improve year after year. And while it's great news that we passed a budget, I think it's just as important to talk about how we got there, because this year we worked really hard, and we did that together, and we created a process with clear expectations, a clear calendar, meaningful opportunities for public feedback, and consistent collaboration between the administration and City Council. I think many of us have seen and watched and lived through budget processes that are defined by conflict or uncertainty or a lot of last-minute scrambling, and I'm really proud that on balance, we all remain focused on partnership, on shared priorities, and on leaning into our new process together. And so I'm super grateful for everybody who participated in that, for the degree of partnership that it required, and for the outcome. Second, I want to talk about the priorities that this budget reflects, because ultimately budgets are statements of values, and they reflect what we prioritize, where we choose to invest, what kind of city we want to become. And from the beginning, we said that we wanted to build a thriving Richmond with thriving neighborhoods, thriving families, thriving economies, and a thriving city hall. And this budget reflects broad alignment around what matters most for Richmond. In this approved budget, we make historic investments, more than $40 million in affordable housing and anti-displacement strategies. We approved the largest allocation ever for Richmond Public Schools, $257 million, which is an $8 million increase over FY26, and then $9.3 million for capital improvements to the schools for infrastructure and facility upgrades. And we've invested in our workforce by fully funding our contractual commitments to unionized city workers and prioritizing raises for contracted janitorial workers, moving them up to $18 an hour. Third, I want to talk about what comes next, because passing a budget is just the beginning, right? Next, we got to focus on excellent implementation and successful delivery, thoughtfully, effectively, and with accountability to the people of Richmond. And so we continue the good and hard work of setting high standards for our staff, looking at our systems, improving them, determining
to get to a place where we could have agreement, both in terms of looking at administration, council, and community around the priorities for our city. And as the mayor said, a budget is merely a reflection of the priorities any place. And so from the work that my council colleagues last evening in our budget process, coming out of all of the advance work that was done, the investments reflect the priorities. Affordable housing, right? Looking at our schools, the largest investment, over $257 million, 11.7 in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Our city workers, and whether we're talking about our community benefit agreement, our union agreements, our increases in terms of our general workforce as well as our contractors, it reflects our priorities for our city and for our community. And so I'm shortening the version, the mayor, again, this was the advance work that was so critical, was an absolute team effort, and it cannot be understated. It makes this budget session probably the most epic in terms of our work together in the city. Commitment, collaboration, cooperation, and with not just, certainly with the administration and the staff, the mayor, your staff, council, our staff, the council members, and the citizens. Hearing from the citizens throughout in terms of the town halls, the engagement processes in terms of understanding budget that occurred. I mean, there was a journey here, and with that, I can say that we have passed a budget that we are pleased with, but needless to say, I would like to have more. We know that we have more challenges, and therein lies the opportunity for us to work even more diligently to address some of the things that we were not able on this first run to get included, but that we'll look for as we move forward. So in closing, I want to say congratulations to everyone for the successful budget that reflects our community shared vision. And again, I cannot emphasize enough the critical importance of the engagement in advance, the teamwork in advance that was done with the mayor, his administration and staff, city council staff, council members, and at the center of that, the community and the community's voice in terms of what priorities they saw and wanted to see in terms of the budget. So with that, I've shortened this quite a bit. It was a slightly long evening last night, but I just have to say on behalf of City Council, we are appreciative and absolutely committed to the ongoing work in our city on behalf of our citizens, and look forward to the next iteration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Avula. Thank you, Councilwoman Newbill, and good morning, everybody. My name is Shannon Paul, and I'm designated to speak to you today as the city's transformation manager, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't also speak to you as a long-term serving city employee, having worked here since April 24, 2000, so that makes 26 years. 17 of those years were in the budget department, the Department of Budget and Strategic Planning. And in that time, I must say, there have been efforts at collaboration. There have been efforts at alignment. I'm not going to get up here and say this has never been done before, right? But what is new about this is a concerted effort, actual practice every day of city leaders really trying to have open and honest conversations with each other, even when it's tough. Because guess what? Running a city is tough. Don't let anybody tell you it's different. And so I have some prepared words, but I wanted to say that because you've already heard alignment from the mayor to Councilwoman Newbill in terms of what the priorities and focus are. And so don't think of this as repetition, think of it as alignment when you hear me speak, okay? The Mayoral Action Plan is what I'm here to speak about. It's known as the MAP, and that's what it is. It's a clear roadmap that demonstrates the mayor's commitment to accountability and high-quality service delivery, advancing city leadership's shared vision of Richmond as a city where all people and places thrive. From the beginning, the goal was not simply to create a vision document, but to actually implement a framework that could guide decision-making across city government, implement, not just have a document that sits on the shelf with a nice bow and you drag it out for the media every now and then. This is a living, breathing document that guides our operational effectiveness, hopefully, again, for an outcome where all Richmonders thrive. When departments are thinking and encouraged to think about not only the individual services or programs, but about how their work aligns with the outcomes our community is asking for and the priorities we've collectively established, it creates a much stronger foundation for decision-making. And I think that's what's happened with this year's budget. It helps answer important questions like, where should we focus our resources? Where should we invest time, energy, and capacity? And how do we ensure the investments are connected to broader community goals? You can see this alignment reflected across all pillars of the action plan. But since our time today is limited, I'm not going to go through all pillars of the action plan. But I do want to highlight a few. Under Thriving City Hall, the budget invests in workforce stability and operational capacity so the city can better deliver for residents, underscoring our goals to, guess what? Let's just do the basics better. Let's practice accountability. Let's not just talk about it. And let's improve resident satisfaction and trust in city government. Knowing that these things won't be easy, we're still staking a claim that we're going to do it. We're going to try. We're going to make the effort, and then we're going to measure our progress. And guess what? We're going to tell you about it, whether it's good or not. Now, how you guys respond to that is another thing, but this is about a focused effort of transparency and accountability. Thank you. I'll give you your money later. Under Thriving Families, the budget reflects major investments in schools, childcare, youth development, after-school programming, and family resources by supporting the academic success of RPS, connecting school-age kids to high-quality activities beyond the classroom, and giving every student an opportunity to thrive after their K-12 education. And finally, under Thriving Neighborhoods, the budget prioritizes housing affordability, anti-displacement strategies, neighborhood safety, and community stability by focusing on goals to build more homes for more people, develop a new model of affordable housing and strengthen stability, and keep our neighborhoods safe and prepared. So these aren't isolated investments, and these aren't platitudes. They are interconnected priorities designed to improve quality of life and long-term outcomes across the city, with the ultimate intended outcome of a consistently thriving Richmond. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Popovich. I have the privilege of serving as our city's Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Human Services. And while Human Services is focused on the thriving of all people, I get to talk to you about our children and families pillar. As a parent myself, I know that it takes a village to raise a family, and I'm thankful for the many supports we have in place for that. But there was a reality this year as we were collecting and figuring out the support for our children and families, that there is not a shortage of need, that there are many families experiencing challenges for housing and for food security, and part of this budget really wants to support them. What we did to create this process is we relied on resident engagement, on data, on our capacity, and our strong partnerships in our community. We know there's no way the city can do this alone, and we need our partners to come alongside us as well. Even within some of our budget constraints this year, the mayor, the administration, and city council have remained committed to a thoughtful, transparent, and collaborative process so we can continue investing in our people, in our families, and in our neighborhoods. As I mentioned, Human Services portfolio touches many aspects of life, where people live, where people go to school, where people shop and worship and play, and a lot of this happens on a day-to-day basis in our communities. And that requires the coordination across city departments, nonprofit partners, shelters, schools, libraries, and our community partners to really make this work together. So whether it's in times of crisis, activating an emergency shelter, or caring for our families in terms of crisis, helping families avoid eviction, connecting students to services like communities and schools throughout the school day, or creating safe after-school connections for our young people who will lead our future. These investments matter because they create the stability and connection for our residents and our communities. So under Pillar 3, a thriving family, this budget includes the following. $500,000 to support community and school coordinators who help students and families connect to critical services and supports. $500,000 in child care assistance through the Early Child Care and Education Trust Fund. That fund really focuses on families who have 0 to 5-year-olds. $1 million in after-school programming at all 7 RPS middle schools. So no matter where a kid goes to middle school, they have access to quality after-school programming. $850,000 for positive youth development for young people ages 11 to 19. This is a variety of programs that happen after school hours. That might be a gardening class, that might be exercise, that might be academic support that support our kids after school hours. $625,000 to support children and family grant-making process for nonprofit organizations serving Richmond families. So our nonprofit community will have the opportunity to apply for those grants and serve our young people in creative and innovative ways. City Council also added $483,000 for transportation and security to support students safely and consistently accessing after-school programming and ensuring they get home safely. And importantly, this budget recognizes that family well-being and housing stability are deeply connected. That's why this budget also invests in eviction diversion, our family crisis fund, our right to counsel services, and tax relief for older adults and residents with disabilities, all aimed at helping residents remain stable and remain in the communities that are their homes. This budget also includes investments supporting violence prevention and community safety efforts, including $644,000 to support immediate crisis intervention through trauma-informed services. One thing I'm especially encouraged about is the emphasis on partners and outcome community investment. Through the Children and Families grant-making process, this transition we've made this year from individualized grants to the holistic community and children families process, we're really able to partner with partners around shared goals and around shared outcomes. We're committed to strengthening how the city works alongside organizations already deeply rooted in our neighborhoods and our communities. At the end of the day, these investments are more than about programs or line items. They're about helping people, helping our children, helping our families feel supported, connected, safe, and able to thrive in Richmond. I'm really thankful for the partnerships across here at the city and in our communities that made this work. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Merrick Malone, and I am Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Richmond. I'd like to thank the mayor, thank you and the council for really helping to make housing really a real priority, and this budget reflects that. It's interesting because a lot of what I was going to say has been said, so there are a couple of things I will say about this budget and why we're grateful and really ready to get to work. First of all, it does represent the shared priorities of a council, stakeholders, and our mayor. And, you know, I knew we would get there because it was a common goal. Affordable housing is a common goal for everyone. It should be if it's not. Now, maybe the strategy of how you approach funding, you know, Mr. Donald always says, he always talks about the sausage making. And the sausage making is not always easy. It is challenging, it requires negotiations, and it's messy. But at the end of the day, we stand here today recognizing that housing is truly a priority. And again, guided by our pillars, meeting the needs of a growing Richmond that gives access to housing across the economic and income scale. That's important. So at the same time, while we're preparing for the new people coming in, our budget reflects that we haven't forgot about preservation of the people who grew up here, who raised their children here, and who contributed to the fabric of the neighborhood that they currently live in. And I'm so proud of the fact that this mayor and this council have recognized not just production, but also preservation. And that's really important. And it was reflected in that budget. It's reflected in our budget priorities. Again, I didn't think we wouldn't get there with the revamping of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We did, and now we have a predictable source of funding, a reliable source of funding that will allow us to do production, preservation, acquisition, all of the things that we need to mitigate our affordable housing crisis. So this budget also includes $1.8 million for our Affordable Housing Performance Grant, which will help us accelerate the production of new multifamily units throughout this city. But this budget also reflects that housing is just not bricks and mortar. It's people. So when you look at the anti-displacement strategies that we have funded, putting our dollars where our mouths are, you can see we view this of taking care of the people in the neighborhood. That's why you heard Amy talk about all those things, so I won't repeat them, but I think it's really important that now we get to work, we execute, we coordinate, we ensure that these neighborhoods, that these investments we're making give us the kind of return so our citizens have housing stability in neighborhoods that are safe, neighborhoods that have strong amenities, and neighborhoods in which they can thrive and that their quality of life will be what we would want for everyone. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I would say, I know we got a lot of staff persons kind of standing out there. Mr. Vincent, you come on up. Mr. Almiraj, y'all come on up and join the, y'all did have to work. You might as well get some of the credit. Ms. Morrison, I'm serious. Come on up. Ms. Martin, y'all should join up here. So I'm not going, yeah. So I got a few pages of paper, but the words are big, so I'll be short. So today, just like every other day, is an extraordinary day in the city of Richmond. I think our council president has said that. Now, look, my first couple of days, I was wondering if she was right. But I'll tell you, it has proven true. There's extraordinary days in the city of Richmond, but not just for the city, specifically for our government. And that's important. I think today is what I would consider a step forward along the path of what I'm considering the city of Richmond's developing set of case studies on delivering a model government. And the budget is a big deal and a big part of that. We are drastically in a different place than we were just a year ago. Today, on the way down here, I was a little tardy. I washed my hands before coming to the presser, and can you believe that water came on? It worked. It continues to come on every single day. Brushed my teeth with it this morning, took a bath, all of those things, despite 2 brutal weather events and an inauguration and about 60 significant events that the city has hosted that have put strain on our system. The city's made historic strides in resolving long-standing audit findings with another historic quarter on the way. I'll tip off the news that we got more history that we're making in resolving those issues, and you'll hear about it really soon. In addition to that, thanks to our finance team and some of those finance leaders standing here with us today, our audit came back with an unmodified opinion, despite quite a bit of fanfare leading up to it. Our procurement activities, which were maligned a year or 2 ago, are now winning awards, receiving mayoral proclamations for the national success that they're receiving. And not only did 70,000 bills go out on time, man, I ain't heard y'all right about it one time. That means they must be right. You know, folks, our residents who receive social services and some of these services that, you know, are extremely, you know, dependent on the government functioning, while there was a lot of fear, they didn't miss one single day of receiving services despite 2 elongated government shutdowns. Despite the federal impasse, at local government, we've gotten it done. The mayor earlier talked about the why behind this budget and the priorities that it reflects. And I'll spend my time just really talking about the how. Because I think we all know passing a budget is an important milestone, but really what matters the most is the execution of the budget and what happens next. I remember saying to the mayor and all these beautiful smiling faces who are here with me today that we would dramatically transform the perception of our government and deliver services that our residents could be proud of. I said that because when I asked the mayor what he wanted in his CAO, he said he wanted a thriving city hall, and that's where we better deliver. And it's interesting because now I did not say that would happen overnight, and I told him that as well. But it's still apparently that was a pretty bold statement. And I tell you, these leaders can attest, no matter what I say, no matter, you know, what declaration is made, there's always a question that comes from somewhere. Mr. Vincent, where does that question come from?
DCAO Popovich.
Hit you. When I think about on September 25th, we officially kicked off our budget. When I think about on September 25th, we officially kicked off our budget process. From what I understand, it's the first time in the strong mayor form of government, the administration and our partners on council kicked this effort off together, because you're not required to. How you start a thing is more often than not how you finish it. And I'll come back to that. Over the last 9 months, we kicked off the budget season in partnership with council, moved up the timeline for the mayor's submittal of his proposed budget, sat together with our elected officials, both the mayor and the council together came up with 8 joint budget priorities, and then we publicized the department enhancements request where you got to find out what we already knew. There's a whole lot more month than there is money. And so what we also did is provided an avenue for engagement of our public before we actually presented the budget through a series of town halls. In such, we completely reframed the budget deliberation process between our mayor and our council. And again, how you start a thing is often how you end it. I can see a dedicated source and a commitment, to affordable housing and the neighborhoods that power our community. Need for renovations courthouse. The proof, as folks say, is in the pudding. And because it was done together from the start by our mayor and our council, it looks like a 7-0 vote. There is not often a time, I sure ain't seen it, and I studied all the council meetings, where there's unanimous anything. They don't even take a break at the same time. But I will say even that 7-0 includes taking some previous no's to a yes. But that's because it started together just short time ago. So I'd like to, one, thank our mayor for his vision and the dynamic leaders who kind of helped get us to this point. Our finance team, those many staff members who often go unrecognized and unappreciated, but today is really kind of their shining moment. Municipal governments around the country got two foundational tasks, and that's developing and delivering an annual budget. And so, simply put, we created and delivered a plan, and with our plan in place, we now get to focus on delivering it. I think you heard from Ms. Paul, where all of her work really gets ratcheted up right now, because thanks to the Mayor Action Plan and the Mayor's vision, we're now equipped with the accountability and a performance tracking tool. And just as important to being able to measure the work, we're focused on delivering it. And we're making sure that residents are kept up to speed and up to date on every single thing we do. And so for me, now more than ever, I'm just confident that we'll be able to continue the work that the mayor started, when he took over, and I think 4 or 5 days later had an emergency. And from that day, he put his hard hat on. I think at that time it was some boots to make sure your shoes didn't get wet, and has continued to make sure that we deliver. And I went through a long list of ways that has occurred. But the two simple reasons why I'm confident is, first, those learning examples that I mentioned before and the challenges that we've had and ultimately overcome. But also, I think, us being committed to, and despite the various odds, we have continued to get it done. So today, memorializing that unity between the mayor and council and delivering a budget for which residents can be proud of is important, because it means the government did a thing that it was tasked with. And if I've learned anything over the last year, take confidence in delivery, and I've got confidence in my mayor, because ultimately Danny delivers. Thank you.
Okay, let us handle some questions. We'll go outlet by outlet. Graham Richmonder, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you may have seen the news this morning that Richmond Circuit Court judges have initiated legal action against the city, basically claiming the city is failing in its duty to provide a fully functional courthouse that's in good shape. What is the city's plan to respond to that, since it could create a new demand for city dollars just as you're wrapping up, closing the chapter on this budget?
Yeah, question is, we received notice from the courts. What's our plan to address what's going on in the courthouse? As CA O'Donnell mentioned, the courthouse has been slated for significant investment and perhaps even replacement for 26 years. I mean, I think these things originally started coming up in the late 90s. I talked, when I came in 16 months ago, it was one of the things we talked with the judges about early on. When Odie came in a few months later, that's when we really started getting into the development of a plan. We've had very frequent communication, and CA O'Donnell, if you want to speak to that, please jump in. But we've had very frequent communication with our partners at the courts. That's why we put $15+ million in the budget to kind of address some of the short-term needs. We know that the building is aging out and that we've got to come up with a plan for long-term replacement. We've been in the process of some of that collaborative work with the judges, and I understand that they want and need more assurances, and so that's why you take formal steps. And so we'll see what comes of it, but it doesn't change our process at all at this point in terms of continuing to host monthly conversations with the judges. Gail Johnson, who runs our Department of General Services, has very regular meetings with them. We will take the money that we've invested and is now improved in our budget to address some of the really short-term needs around roof leaks, plumbing, some of the security measures they've asked for. But we know, this is part of managing an aging city. You got a lot of different needs, and you've got to figure out how to fit them all in.
Have they communicated to you all that they are unsatisfied with that $15 million in the budget? Is that why they're taking this step today?
Yeah, I'll let you'll had more of those.
Yeah, so, that's definitely not what has been expressed to us. As a matter of fact, later today, we'll be sending them some additional information on the activities that we've had. I think what has been said is that for the first time in a while, you know, these efforts have been ratcheted up and taken an extraordinary approach to make sure that the courthouse gets done. And what that means is everything from ensuring that the millions of dollars that we have planned and those that have already been invested continue to make sure there is a safe space and a responsible, you know, accessible location right now. And then that the long-term planning for the future doesn't get kicked down the road anymore. And I think there's confidence in that, but as we all know, the phrase trust but verify did not come from out of nowhere. You have to make sure that you do that. We're willing to work with our partners. We've had a variety of direct conversations. I think when we look back and did the research, we've had at least some form of written or in-person communication once a month since, and this started before I got here, and we've actually just kind of doubled up on that. So great relationship. It's been wonderful working with the Chief Judge. We'll continue to do so, and we'll continue to deliver. I think our budget enhancements are a great example of our commitment to ensuring that they receive exactly what they need. And, you know, we've met most of the tasks that have been provided years ago, so now it's just time to finish the drill.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Donald, I was curious like if you could sum up your assessment or takeaway from this budget process, Richmond's budget process, in comparison or contrast to previous governments you worked with.
Yeah, so I mean, I think early on, the first year, for me, this is my first year, it's always a little push and pull. But I think the key is that no matter where you go, no matter who's sitting in the elected seats, the focus is always on the people. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen from our mayor and council is that engaging people early in the process has given them great confidence in both the public being aware of what has been delivered, but even more so knowing what their needs are direct to consumer so that we can deliver those. And I think it made the budget process, at least for my first year in a place, this has been a lot smoother and a lot more organized. I mean, I've really enjoyed the process, and I think our leaders from top to bottom have done an extraordinary job.
Sabrina. So regarding that court order, I'm not a lawyer, but is there a way that these judges could force the city to pay? Like, what does that process kind of look like?
Yeah, I defer. The question is there a way that the courts could force us to pay? You know, ultimately, this will make its way through the court system. I don't know like all the ins and outs of what the legal process entails. But the next step is that a judge outside of Richmond will look at the situation and say, okay, what is the degree to which investments need to be made to meet the state standards for the courthouse? And can that be done through short-term investment, and how much of that needs to be done through long-term investment?
And this might be a follow-up for Chief Edwards, but the pushback against Flock dominated council public comment last night. What can you share about where we stand with renewing that contract and what's being done to kind of address those concerns that keep popping up?
Question is that lots of concerns about Flock were raised last night. What's the status of the contract, which I'll lean on Chief Edwards for, and what was the last part, Sabrina?
What's being done to address the concerns over it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I sat with a number of residents 2-3 weeks ago maybe to just hear what their concerns were, because we've obviously heard them in public comment. You know, I understand that this is like a really sensitive issue. People are really concerned about data management. They're really concerned about surveillance issues. Now, some of those concerns have been addressed through legal systems, right? So, for example, claims of unconstitutionality have repeatedly been addressed by our court system. You know, I come to this work through using the lens of a public health doc who's always thinking about the risk-benefit calculation for all of the different dynamics of a city that needs to be managed, right? And so there are concerns about how data is managed, how it's shared. I think the state has addressed much of the state has addressed it through legislation. RPD has addressed it through building up a really rigorous audit process. And so, that's one of the things that I grilled the chief on when these questions came on early. I went down to the police headquarters and really met with the people, understood the audit process. And so, we rely on the technology almost weekly to close cases, to address crime that is happening, and that's where the risk benefit comes in, right? We have incident after incident where our folks are able to close a case to save, future crime from happening, or in some cases, future lives from being taken, and that's a pretty significant benefit. And so I will continue to hear resident concerns. We will continue to have a really rigorous data management and monitoring process. If there are continued things that come up, like we're open to, making sure that the technology is used in a responsible way, and also open to hearing, because a lot of this is kind of the emotional side of it, right? Like the people are really concerned about the idea of surveillance. And so, I think Chief has done, and certainly come up and has done a great job of explaining how the technology is actually used, how it doesn't fit into the same bucket of surveillance that people have claimed. I think last night was a good example of where, a lot of the outliers around the country are raised as reasons for us not to use the technology. But I do feel like we have put some really significant guardrails in place to be able to use it responsibly. And so at this point, that risk-benefit calculation leans on the side of benefit. But again, we're open to that. Chief, anything you'd add?
Mr. Mayor, I think you said much of what I would say. I can just tell you that I'm committed to transparency when it comes to this technology. I understand the concerns from our community. I've heard it loud and clear. And I always look to have those one-on-one conversations, even last night with individuals who were expressing concerns. But I think as we've proven, I'm going to be transparent when we fall short. So I talked about that a couple weeks ago where we had a sergeant share information with the FBI related to a homicide investigation. While I understood the reasons behind it, it was still caught in our monthly audits. And you didn't have to wait for 8 months from the Virginia State Police to put it out. If they ever do, we put it out. Even though I know I was going to hear about it loud and clear, and it certainly did. But I think that's just what we're committed to. And as the mayor mentioned, it's a cost-benefit analysis, risk versus reward. And to me, there are certainly theoretical concerns that can happen to Richmonders, but it's more than every week, Mr. Mayor. It's every day this technology, in big ways and small ways, are proving to keep our community safe. The example we talked about, the triple shooting that led to the murder of 2 individuals, an 18-year-old and 14-year-old in Northside on 5th Avenue. Not only did we have a picture of that car leaving the scene, and I was able to put that out to the community, but it wasn't over. Like, what I keep hearing from the community is like, Flock only helps you, or LPR only helps you after something terrible happens. Well, I had just released information that 2 of the individuals involved in that shooting had survived. So we had to double up resources at the hospital. That person hadn't been captured. We were very concerned that he would seek to finish what he started, and that technology helped to catch him. So I think certainly something that is a powerful technology, but some of the concerns I think are outweighed by the incredible benefits to our community. So.
Jamal, go ahead.
So, Mayor, and probably also Cindy, but you guys talked about having the largest investment into RPD, $250 million, but one of the things that wasn't included was investment for Richmond's Virtual Academy. I know a lot of parents have been talking about how they need this academy for their kids, helps them grow, helps them to focus on school, and also for Spanish-speaking families as well, with threats of ICE and stuff like that. So I was wondering why it wasn't funded yesterday, and will those talks stop yesterday, or will you guys continue to try to make sure that it doesn't shut down?
Yeah, questions about school funding and funding or not funding the Richmond Virtual Academy, and what's the future of that. From the city side, the school makes the decisions on how the money is spent, right? I think while Virtual Academy came up, and obviously there was a lot of public comment about it last night, ultimately RPS and their leadership and their school board need to decide on how they prioritize the funds, right? I think our intent was to be responsive to the initial budget that they proposed, given the constraints on our budget. Again, $257 million, an over $8 million increase from last year, the most money we've ever invested in schools. You know, the cost of doing businesses at schools, but also in local government, increases every year. And I think we have got to figure out how do we continue to grow revenue streams, to continue investing in our workforce, to continue people, being competitive as an employer, and make sure that we can provide the services that we need to provide. Sometimes we're going to be able to do that. Sometimes we're not. But ultimately, to the specific question of Richmond Virtual Academy, you know, RPS can still make that decision, right? They can decide to appropriate their dollars differently if that's something that their leadership and their school board want to do.
Have you taken any sort of informal position on that with the school board?
Graham, let's get to Maddie first. We're just going down the line, and then if we've got time. Maddie, go ahead.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, I feel like we go through the same story every year where we talk about how schools are getting the biggest investment yet, but they're still disappointed. What do we have to do moving forward to kind of close that gap? Is it, lowering expectations on their end, or can there be more to be done? Can more be done to give more money?
How do I repeat that question? I think, the art of budget making is that there are so many different needs for so many different constituencies. Obviously, schools is a huge one for me and for many members of our community, and it's why we prioritize that, right? When we're making a budget, that's one of the first things we go to is like, okay, what do the schools need? What are our revenue increase, and how do we match our revenue increase to try to put as much into schools as possible? Part of the equation is going to be more state funding, right? And thankfully, the state really stepped up in really significant ways this year. We're super grateful, but that is after many, many years of inadequate state funding. And so, we'll see, hopefully, that gap continue to close in future years. I think there are real questions that the schools are going to have to tackle about how do they manage their infrastructure, right? I think there have been concerns about a lot of different school land and how do we activate that land for revenue production, right? And understandably, the schools are hesitant to give up land quickly because it's their only leverage, their only opportunity to add significant revenue quickly. But if you look at kind of the land that the city owns, the schools own, Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority own, there's a lot of undeveloped land in the city that we really need to put into action. So that's got to be part of the strategy too. How do we take school and other government-owned land and increase revenue on that? Add housing, add retail, add things that are, because, as a city government, like taxes are how we get money. Revenues are how we get money. And so tax revenues are how we get money. And so if we don't want to raise taxes, which we don't want to do, then we've got to find other avenues. The state has provided another real opportunity this year with the 1 cent local option sales tax for school construction, right? And so that will be something that will go out to a referendum at some point, and then people will decide whether we want to add a 1 cent sales tax to be able to fuel more school construction. So, I think the state is giving us different tools. We've got to manage the land that we can, and then the school ultimately has to manage their operation and figure out, are there opportunities for school consolidation, for taking older buildings offline as we bring new ones on. So it's kind of a multi-pronged solution.
Let's go to Brendan, and then we're kind of closing in on the hour. I know the mayor has to go somewhere. Graham, I think you had a follow-up, maybe Sabrina. If folks want to stay and they can, we'll do that up to their discretion. I think we're probably going to have to wrap up in a minute, but Brendan, why don't you go ahead?
I wanted to ask you about utilities. Your budget comes with rate hikes. On average, residents are paying about $14 more per month for gas and water. And this comes on the heels, of course, high grocery costs, high gas prices, electricity is going up as well. So what is your message to Richmonders who are struggling financially?
Yeah, the question is about utility increases and how do we talk to residents about that? I think the timing is really challenging, right? I mean, everybody's struggling as the cost of living is just increasing everywhere, whether that's housing, food, gas, et cetera. And that is true for running a utility operation as well. And when you look at our utility operation and the lack of consistent investment it's had over the last decade plus, it's a reality of deferred investment, right? And so now what we've got to do is to try to do a little catch up to make sure, especially after last January, to make sure that the system can sustain the growth that the city's experiencing. And the only way to do that is by continued investment. And so, I think my message to residents of Richmond is that these are important investments that we've got to make for the good of our community, right? For reliable water, for reliable utility service. We've got to do that work and know that we're going to take that very seriously. Like, we debated a lot internally about just how much could we increase given the current context, and so we are both trying to be sensitive to the pressures that people are facing, but also trying to do our primary responsibility, which is ensuring that the basic services that a city requires can actually be delivered.
Okay, I think we're gonna wrap. Some folks need to leave. Why don't you come? Yeah, why don't Graham, if you
Just
want
back
to
to
come over
virtual
here?
cabinet for one quick second.
Do you have a minute?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you think the school board and the superintendent should try to save that program now that the ball is back in their court, or is your position that you're staying out of it, that's their decision?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally their decision. I don't make any decisions about how the school allocates their money or what the most effective educational interventions are. I leave that to the school experts. So I think that is RPS administration should be the primary drivers of that decision, and then based on the case, then school board ultimately makes that decision.
I had a quick question about the renewal of the FLOC contract. I know I asked a double whammy, but I was wondering where we stand on renewing FLOC.
Yeah, so the contract.
And that is the last question because people have to go, all right?
So to be clear, Flock Safety has multiple platforms. So the LPR section is up in June for renegotiation. There is a gunshot detection component that is up in September. So we will be negotiating that through procurement.
So we're still in negotiations.
I don't think we've started yet on the price, if that's your question, but we are prepared to go forward.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.